The summer heat shimmered over Oak Ridge Estates, a carefully manicured suburban development where pristine lawns and unspoken social rules reigned supreme. Maria Rodriguez stood out in this world of conformity, not because she wanted to, but because her very existence challenged the neighborhood's unwritten expectations. At 35, she was a single mother who had fought tooth and nail to create a stable life for herself and her son, Miguel. Her journey hadn't been easy. 5 years earlier, Maria had escaped an emotionally abusive relationship, taking nothing but her son and her determination. Working as a freelance graphic designer, she had carefully rebuilt her life, saving every extra penny to purchase a modest home in what she hoped would be a fresh start. The house wasn't anything fancy, a small 3-bedroom ranch with a slightly overgrown backyard that spoke more to potential than perfection. The above-ground pool had been her most significant investment and her greatest source of joy. For Miguel, it was more than just a swimming pool. It was a place of laughter, of healing, of reclaiming happiness after years of tension and uncertainty. Maria had researched extensively before installation, ensuring every permit was in order, every safety measure considered. She had saved for 2 years, picking up extra design projects, cutting back on personal expenses, all to create this small oasis for her son. Oak Ridge Estates prided itself on being a community, though Maria had quickly learned that community often meant conformity. Most homes looked identical, beige or gray, with perfectly trimmed hedges and matching mailboxes. The Homeowners Association was legendary in its strictness, with monthly newsletters that read more like legal documents than community updates. Every lawn, every exterior paint color, every landscaping choice was scrutinized with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Miguel loved the pool more than anything. At 10 years old, he was learning to find confidence in the water, a stark contrast to the shy boy he had been just a few years earlier. Swimming became their ritual. Early mornings before work and school, weekend afternoons filled with splash fights and laughter that seemed to wash away their past struggles. Little did Maria know that her peaceful sanctuary was about to be challenged by Linda Thompson, a woman who had appointed herself as the neighborhood's self-proclaimed guardian of aesthetic and moral standards. Known to everyone as the quintessential Karen, Linda was a retired real estate agent in her mid-60s who seemed to have made it her life's mission to enforce her narrow view of suburban perfection. From her meticulously maintained corner lot, Linda had a perfect view of Maria's backyard. The above-ground pool, with its slightly faded blue liner and somewhat imperfect surrounding deck, was an affront to everything Linda believed a proper home should represent. Where Maria saw a symbol of resilience and joy, Linda saw only imperfection and a potential threat to property values. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the very meaning of community, property rights, and the thin line between concern and harassment. Maria Rodriguez had no idea that her summer was about to become a battleground, with her beloved pool at the center of a conflict that would reveal more about her neighbors and herself than she could have ever imagined. The day had started like any other summer Saturday. Maria had carefully applied sunscreen to Miguel's shoulders, listening to him excitedly recount the swimming moves he'd been practicing. The above-ground pool, though not Olympic-sized, was their sanctuary, a place where memories of past hardships seemed to dissolve with each splash and laugh. Miguel cannonballed into the water, sending arcs of sparkling droplets into the air. Maria watched, a rare moment of pure contentment washing over her. Her freelance design work had been challenging lately, with tight deadlines and demanding clients, but moments like these made everything worthwhile. The pool represented more than just a recreational feature. It was a symbol of their hard-won stability, a testament to how far they'd come. Linda Thompson's appearance was as sudden as it was deliberate. She materialized at the chain-link fence separating their properties, her perfectly pressed khaki capras and pristine white blouse a stark contrast to Maria's comfortable swimsuit cover-up. In her hand, she clutched what appeared to be a clipboard, a prop that seemed designed to add an air of official disapproval to her presence. "Excuse me," Linda's voice cut through the summer air like a knife. "I couldn't help but notice some irregularities with your pool installation." Maria turned, forcing a polite smile. She recognized the tone. It was the same passive-aggressive approach she'd encountered countless times before. Miguel, sensing the tension, stopped mid-splash and looked up cautiously. "Is there a problem?" Maria asked, keeping her voice calm and measured. Linda's eyes swept over the pool with an exaggerated look of concern. "Well, the positioning seems questionable, and those supports look less than optimal. Have you had this professionally inspected?" Her tone suggested she already knew the answer and was certain it would be unfavorable. Miguel moved closer to his mother, his earlier excitement replaced by a familiar nervousness. Maria recognized the way he was tensing up, a remnant of their more difficult past. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. The pool was installed by a licensed professional. Maria responded, her voice firm but controlled. "We followed all local regulations and obtained the necessary permits." But Linda was just getting started. She began to list a litany of perceived issues: the pool's proximity to the property line, its potential impact on neighboring property values, the unsightly nature of an above-ground pool, and what she considered a premium neighborhood. Each criticism was delivered with a mix of false concern and thinly veiled condescension. Maria knew the type. She had dealt with similar attitudes throughout her life. People who seemed more interested in controlling others than understanding them. Her years of graphic design work had taught her patience, but her experiences as a single mother had given her an unshakable resolve. "Miguel," she said softly, "why don't you go grab us some lemonade?" It was a subtle signal, a way to shield her son from the growing tension while giving herself a moment to choose her words carefully. As Miguel disappeared into the house, Linda continued her tirade. The clipboard was now being used as a pointing device, punctuating each criticism with a sharp gesture. "In this neighborhood, we have standards," she declared as if she were the sole arbiter of community aesthetics. Maria took a deep breath. This was about more than just a pool. This was about her right to create a home, to find joy, to exist without constant judgment, and she was done apologizing for her existence. The days following Linda's initial confrontation became a meticulously planned campaign of harassment. Linda Thompson was nothing if not persistent, and she approached her mission to challenge Maria's pool with the strategic precision of a military operation. Her first move was documentation. Each morning, Linda would appear at her bedroom window, camera in hand, capturing what she considered evidence of the pool's supposed violations. She photographed the pool from every conceivable angle, over the fence, through the hedge, even going so far as to use a small ladder to get a higher vantage point. The photos were carefully organized in a thick manila folder, which she began to circulate among other neighborhood residents. Maria first became aware of the extent of Linda's campaign when her other neighbors started giving her strange looks. Mrs. Peterson from 2 doors down averted her eyes when Maria collected her mail. The Johnson family, who had always been friendly, suddenly became distant during their morning walks. Whispers seemed to follow Maria whenever she went outside, a subtle undercurrent of judgment that she couldn't quite pin down. Miguel noticed the change first. "Mom," he asked one evening, "why are people looking at us weird?" The question broke Maria's heart. She had worked so hard to create a sense of security and normalcy for her son, and now Linda was threatening that delicate balance. The Homeowners Association became Linda's next weapon. She began flooding their office with complaint letters, each more dramatically worded than the last. She cited obscure bylaws, questioned the pool's structural integrity, and implied that Maria's installation was not just an eyesore but a potential safety hazard. The letters were masterpieces of passive-aggressive language, each one carefully worded to sound concerned rather than vindictive. Maria's job as a graphic designer had taught her the importance of documentation. She kept meticulous records: the original permits, the installation contract, photographs of the professional installation process. She knew she had followed every possible regulation, but Linda's persistent complaints began to wear on her nerves. The local zoning office started receiving anonymous tips. Inspectors began showing up at inconvenient times, clipboard in hand, asking to see Maria's documentation. Each time, Maria was prepared. Her files were immaculate, her permits current, her installation perfect, but the constant interruptions were taking their toll. Miguel became quieter. The pool, once a source of pure joy, now felt like a source of stress. He would look out the window cautiously, watching for Linda or the next inspector. Maria noticed him practicing his swimming with less enthusiasm, constantly looking over his shoulder. What Linda didn't realize was the depth of Maria's resilience. Each complaint, each attempt to undermine her only made Maria more determined. She began to document Linda's harassment meticulously. Photographs of the surveillance, copies of every complaint letter, timestamps of Linda's various intrusive behaviors. The breaking point was approaching. Maria knew that Linda wouldn't stop unless someone stood up to her. The pool was more than just a backyard feature. It was a symbol of everything Maria and Miguel had fought for: their peace, their right to enjoy their home, their small piece of happiness. As summer heated up, so did the conflict. Linda Thompson had picked a fight with the wrong family, and Maria Rodriguez was about to show her exactly what resilience looked like. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, just as Maria was finalizing a critical design project for a major client. Her phone buzzed with Miguel's school number, a sound that instantly set her nerves on edge. When she answered, her son's voice was trembling, barely holding back tears. "Mom," Miguel choked out, "they're saying we have to get rid of the pool. Mrs. Bentley at school said something about Dad might come and take it away." Maria's heart stopped. She knew exactly where this was coming from. Linda's relentless campaign had now reached Miguel's school, spreading rumors and causing emotional distress to her 10-year-old son. The situation had spiraled far beyond a simple neighborhood dispute. Linda had apparently contacted the school, spinning a complex narrative about unsafe living conditions and potential legal issues. Miguel, already sensitive from past experiences, was terrified that their home, their sanctuary, was about to be torn apart. Maria's mind raced. She remembered the careful journey they'd taken to find stability. After leaving an emotionally abusive relationship, she had worked tirelessly to create a safe, nurturing environment for Miguel. The pool wasn't just a recreational feature. It was a symbol of their freedom, their resilience, their ability to find joy after years of difficulty. That evening, Miguel was uncharacteristically quiet. He sat at the dinner table, pushing food around his plate, his usual enthusiasm completely diminished. The spark that swimming had once brought to his eyes had been replaced by a deep-seated anxiety. Maria watched her son, realizing that Linda's campaign was doing more than just challenging a pool. It was attacking their sense of security. "We're not doing anything wrong," Maria said softly, reaching out to touch Miguel's hand. "Sometimes people try to make us feel small, but that doesn't mean they're right." The next day brought further escalation. A certified letter arrived from the local authorities requesting a formal inspection of the property. The language was official, but Maria could see the subtle fingerprints of Linda's influence in every carefully worded line. It demanded a comprehensive review of the pool's installation, safety features, and compliance with local regulations. Maria knew this was more than a routine inspection. This was Linda's attempt to force them out, to prove some twisted point about neighborhood standards and conformity. The timing was deliberate, coming just as Maria was preparing for her busiest work season, when resources and patience were already stretched thin. She began gathering documentation with a methodical determination. Permit files, installation certificates, photographs of the professional installation process. Maria had kept everything. Her years of freelance work had taught her the importance of meticulous record-keeping, and now those skills would be her strongest defense. Miguel watched her, his anxiety gradually transforming into a quiet admiration. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked, a hint of hope replacing his earlier fear. Maria looked up, meeting her son's eyes with a strength that had carried them through far more challenging times. "We're going to be more than okay," she said firmly. "We're going to show them exactly who we are." The pool had become more than just a backyard feature. It was now a battleground, a test of their resilience, their right to exist peacefully in their own home. Linda had no idea what she was truly up against. Maria Rodriguez was about to fight back, not with anger, but with an unshakable determination that would reveal the true meaning of community, respect, and belonging. The morning of the official investigation dawned hot and tense. Maria had barely slept, spending most of the night organizing her documentation and preparing for what could be the most important meeting of her life. Miguel watched her with a mixture of anxiety and quiet admiration, seeing a side of his mother he rarely witnessed, a fierce, methodical warrior ready to defend their home. Detective Robert Garrett arrived precisely at 9 a.m. He was not the stereotypical small-town officer Maria had expected. A seasoned investigator in his early 50s, Garrett had seen his share of neighborhood disputes and had developed a keen sense for distinguishing between genuine concerns and petty harassment. As he stepped into the backyard, his trained eye immediately began examining the pool. Maria watched nervously, her folder of documents clutched tightly to her chest. Miguel stood slightly behind her, his small hand occasionally reaching out to touch her back, a gesture of support that spoke volumes about their relationship. Garrett methodically worked through his inspection. He measured distances from property lines, examined the pool's structural integrity, and carefully reviewed the installation certificates. Each movement was deliberate, professional, and completely detached from the emotional drama that had preceded this moment. "Ms. Rodriguez," he began, "can you walk me through the installation process?" His tone was neutral, neither accusatory nor dismissive. Maria took a deep breath and began to explain. She detailed how she had researched pool installation for months, consulted multiple professionals, and ensured every possible safety measure was in place. She spoke about the certified installers, the permits, the inspections that had already been conducted. Her voice was steady, her documentation impeccable. Meanwhile, Linda Thompson watched from her adjacent property, binoculars in hand, clearly believing she was witnessing her moment of triumph. What she didn't realize was that her repeated complaints had already raised red flags with local authorities. Detective Garrett pulled out a notebook, listening carefully. He asked pointed questions about the pool's foundations, drainage, and safety features. Maria answered each one without hesitation, her graphic design background proving invaluable in her ability to present clear, logical information. Miguel, sensing the tension, brought out a small folder he had secretly prepared. Inside were drawings he had made, detailed sketches of the pool's installation, complete with measurements and notes he had overheard from the original installers. The detective's eyebrows raised slightly, impressed by the boy's attention to detail. "These are quite impressive," Garrett said to Miguel, who beamed with pride. The investigation revealed more than just the pool's technical details. It exposed a pattern of harassment that had been carefully documented by Maria. Copies of Linda's complaint letters, timestamped photographs of her surveillance, and a detailed log of every interaction formed a compelling narrative of persistent, unwarranted harassment. As the morning progressed, the true nature of the situation became clear. This was no simple dispute about a backyard pool. This was about something much deeper, the fundamental right to peaceful enjoyment of one's property, free from baseless persecution. Detective Garrett took his time methodically working through every detail. Maria could see something changing in his demeanor, a growing respect for her meticulous preparation and a clear understanding of the situation's nuanced dynamics. When he finally closed his notebook, there was the hint of a smile on his face. Miguel squeezed his mother's hand, sensing that something significant had just occurred. The investigation was far from over, but one thing had become abundantly clear. Maria Rodriguez was not going to be bullied out of her home. The investigation into Linda Thompson's complaints took an extraordinary turn that no one in Oak Ridge Estates could have anticipated. Detective Garrett's methodical approach uncovered a history of harassment that extended far beyond Maria Rodriguez's property. As part of the standard procedure, Garrett began to dig deeper into Linda's past complaints. What he discovered was a disturbing pattern of systematic harassment against multiple neighbors over the years. File after file revealed a trail of frivolous reports, baseless accusations, and a consistent method of attempting to control and intimidate community members. The department's records showed that Linda had previously filed complaints against at least 6 different families in the neighborhood. There was the Rodriguez family, who had painted their house a shade of blue she deemed inappropriate. The Kimura family had been targeted for their unconventional landscaping. The Ramirez family had endured months of scrutiny over their backyard vegetable garden. Each complaint followed a similar pattern. Linda would begin with seemingly innocuous observations, gradually escalating to official reports, anonymous tips, and increasingly aggressive attempts to force compliance with her narrow view of neighborhood standards. She had weaponized local regulations, turning them into tools of personal vendetta. What made the situation more complex was Linda's background. A retired real estate agent with a history of being a top performer, she had once been respected in the community. But something had changed. Her retirement seemed to have transformed her into a self-appointed neighborhood enforcer, wielding bureaucratic processes like weapons. Detective Garrett's investigation revealed something even more surprising. Linda's own property had multiple code violations that she had managed to avoid addressing for years. Unauthorized shed extensions, landscape features that encroached on setback lines, electrical modifications done without proper permits. Ironically, she was guilty of exactly the types of infractions she loved to report in others. Maria sat in stunned silence as Garrett walked her through the findings. Miguel listened intently, his young mind trying to process the complex web of neighborhood politics and personal vendettas. Your pool, Garrett explained, is not just legally installed. It's actually a model of proper residential pool implementation. He showed Maria the detailed report, which meticulously documented every aspect of the pool's compliance with local and state regulations. The most shocking revelation came when they discovered Linda had a personal vendetta against families that didn't fit her narrow definition of an ideal neighborhood resident. Single mothers, immigrant families, anyone who seemed different became targets of her relentless complaints. For Maria, the revelation was both vindicating and deeply troubling. She realized that the harassment wasn't personal. It was systematic, a form of control that targeted those perceived as vulnerable. Miguel, sensing the gravity of the moment, squeezed his mother's hand. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked, a mix of worry and hope in his voice. Detective Garrett's response was immediate and reassuring. "More than okay," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "You've not only defended your rights but potentially helped expose a much larger issue in the community." The investigation had transformed from a simple pool dispute into something much more significant. It was now about challenging a system that allowed such harassment to continue unchecked. Linda Thompson had picked the wrong family to mess with. Maria Rodriguez was about to become more than just a victim. She was about to become a catalyst for change in Oak Ridge Estates.